Howl and Footnote to Howl by Allen Ginsberg. James Baldwin was black and gay. Allen Ginsberg was Jewish and gay. And he is considered one of the representative voices of the Beat generation, a term coined by fellow Beat Jack Kerouac, short for beaten down and also beatified. In other words, beautiful. He was strongly influenced by his fellow Beat friends, Jack Kerouac for his sprawling and extensive style, although Kerouac wrote prose and Ginsberg transferred that to his poetry, and William S. Burroughs, the notorious author of Naked Lunch. Kerouac, his best-known work is On the Road. You may have heard of it. From Burroughs, he got the gritty, obscene, comic apocalyptic view of the world. His most obvious and profound poetic influences were Walt Whitman, especially with his use of the long poetic line, very reminiscent of Whitman's Leaves of Grass, Song of Myself, and William Carlos Williams, who said that there are no ideas but in things, hence his highly objective style that lets objects speak for themselves and images speak for themselves, devoid of any additional forced symbolism. And on his use of the long line, he said that it is accommodating not the way you would say it, a thought, but the way you would think it, i.e. we think rapidly in visual images as well as words, and if each successive thought were transcribed in its confusion, you get a slightly different prosody than if you were talking slowly. So, using the long line, he is trying to achieve really a similar goal to what Emily Dickinson way back at the beginning of the course was trying to do with her shorter, more fragmented style. And Ginsberg spent time in the Columbia Psychiatric Institute after graduation out of pleading insanity to avoid conviction as an accomplice for his addict friend Herbert Hunk's storage of stolen items to support his drug habit. Now the poem Howl. It's considered the birth trauma of the Beat generation. It's that seminal. Ginsberg's 1955 reading of Howl at the Sixth Gallery in San Francisco. It's considered the birth trauma of the Beat generation. He was influenced by William Carlos Williams, and he was lucky enough to have the man himself introduce him at this historic reading. And he introduced Ginsberg in a rather flamboyant way, saying, "Hold back the edges of your gowns, ladies, we are going through hell." And Howl combined apocalyptic criticism of the dull, prosperous Eisenhower years with its exuberant celebration of an emerging counterculture. The beatniks and, well, their immediate followers, culturally speaking, the so-called hippies of the 60s. Frustrating, soul-killing capitalism and consumerism were his targets, as well as mainstream staleness and heteronormative constraints. In other words, the constraints that worked, well, the homophobic constraints that went against homosexuals. Ginsberg being a homosexual himself, of course. Now, considerations for reading Howl. So why the long line, Whitman-esque, see the footnote to Howl. And why the obscenity? You will notice this poem is a doozy when it comes to bad language, but that is a hallmark of the Beat movement. It introduced It gave American literature that sort of free license to include profanity in the literature for a gritty realism. So just be prepared. I'm sure there's a variety of sensibilities in the among the enrollment for this course, but it is literature, and we are all adults here, so I expect you to receive it and respond to it as such. The significance of the urban environment, that is, the city. How the usually Gothic trope of distorted perception, in this case from drug use, becomes a means of unexpected illumination for the speaker. The preoccupations with anti-capitalism and anti-materialism, and counterculture, that is, the beat culture, as a symptom reaction to American culture. Think of it as more of a personal roadblock, a more symbolic one that is more psychic than the literal running out of the West that was spoken of in both The Leader of the People and The Swimmer. This is going to be an interesting one. I'm looking forward to your responses.